I'm sitting in Washington, D.C. I'm Katherine Marshall, and I'd like to welcome all of you to a fifth, I think, in the series of webinars that we're doing that explore the impact of the COVID epidemic and crisis on faith communities and the impact that faith communities are having on the way that the crisis is handled. Today we have a privilege of two colleagues and friends. Khun Moo is sitting in Bangkok and Khun Vidya is sitting in Kuala Lumpur. Both of them have multiple identities working across many countries and across many sectors. But what is binding them today and the common theme or the thread in our conversation today is their involvement in INEB, the International Network of Engaged Buddhists. And what I've suggested that we do is to have a conversation. I've invited them even to disagree with each other and with me to make this more interesting. But the basic question is really, what is happening and what do you see happening in the future that particularly relates to the roles of religious leaders, institutions, practices, and of course, particularly Buddhism in this extraordinary international crisis. So I've asked each of them to kick us off with some thoughts and some ideas. You can put questions in the Q&A box, and of course we can all follow up, as I'm sure we will, but we'll have therefore their sort of first comments to get us thinking, and then we'll have some exchange among us and then open it up to the questions that we get through the Q&A box. So let me turn first, Vidya, why don't you start off? I asked you earlier what you made of what was happening. What's the story? How do we understand how this crisis is affecting societies, but also religious communities? And you're seeing it both from Malaysia, but also from the other countries where you work. So over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning and good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me here. It's a very interesting question to ask. Why is it interesting? Because the answer is I don't know what is really happening, right? Why do I say this? Because in most of our countries that we're in now, we are in lockdown mode. Right? In Malaysia, we call it, where I'm staying now, we call it the mandatory movement control order. We can't leave the home, you have a lot of restrictions on movement. So we are dependent on our devices for all the news and information, right? So we have lots of information, but do we have enough knowledge of what's happening out there? I surely don't know exactly what's really happening out there. Okay? But we know one thing for sure, from the faith-based practice, we have been in touch with people who are in the vulnerable communities, you know, who need help, who are being sidelined in this whole crisis, this whole pandemic, and their suffering is so bad that they don't have enough money to buy food. They are out of jobs, right? So we have activating a lot of groups and activities to support these groups, and this is what we could see. Way beyond that is really what we read. Okay, so maybe Khun Moo will tell you a little bit more about what we are doing in responding to these communities. So I would like to start off with that, what we don't know. So, and we assume we know because all the messages that go around in our WhatsApp, in our messaging, blows up a lot of information and a lot more misinformation, and that's the worrying part. So that's the first thing I want to express. In Malaysia, particularly if you are unfamiliar with the country, just at the start of the pandemic, Malaysia went through a political crisis. Okay, the government changed when several members from the ruling party moved to another party, and now we have a total new government. And that happened right in the middle of this whole pandemic. So that brings a lot more uncertainty, a lot more concern coming into our society, coming to our community. So this is something that we are watching very closely, and we're trying to understand what direction are we heading. Okay, but underlining all this, the suffering of the people, the vulnerables, the people who are losing their jobs. We don't have the real figures. I'm hearing 5,000 companies have shut down, 10,000 companies shut down, But we know that if you ask around, we know of friends and friends who have lost jobs. And that alone is a crisis that we all have to come together, whether you're civil society, the corporations, the government, and the religious institutions, the religious actors have to come. And that is the reality we have to face. So I think maybe I start off with that, yeah.
What about the situation of migrants in the region?
This is thank you, very interesting question, I can share with you two perspectives. Number one, in Malaysia, I think in the recent weeks, we have seen a lot of attacks, backlash against the migrants, especially the illegal immigrants, and in particularly, you may have read in the news, the Rohingya community has been targeted very, very severely, and I feel very sad about this situation. And it's not just a particular community speaking up against the Rohingyas, but it seems to be cutting across the board. The different ethnic groups, the different religions, religious people have also come out against this, right? So I can't say authoritatively what's the reason behind it, but I can stipulate a few possible situations. One is possibly related to the political situation in our country. Secondly, that our neighbors, Singapore. Singapore have over 20,000 cases, and a huge majority of those cases, the COVID-19 cases, were from the migrant community, the migrant workers community. And obviously there's a fear, that's building around this. Malaysia and Singapore, we're almost a one country, right? We had been one country before in the past. Right? So I think this growing suspicion is happening in our community, and this is very sad. We need to do something about this, and how we need to tackle this, I think, is something that we need to converse, we need to discuss, and we need to share more ideas and turn them into action. So,
well, thank you. Khun Moo, I have a load of questions for you. First, if you could just give us some idea of what's happening in Thailand at the moment, because as I was telling you before, we're seeing not very much information, certainly not reliable information in the press here, which is obsessed with what's happening internally. And then secondly, maybe tell us a little bit about INEB and how INEB is, what is it? How do you see it? Because you're a guiding hand behind it, but also how it's responding to the crisis. Over to you.
Good evening and good morning there. Regarding to COVID, before I answer your questions, concerning about COVID, what I know is because of COVID is make us to wearing masks. But at the same time, COVID also is unmasked in many issues, right? And first of all, we know that is especially we have the ignorance with the mother nature, that is, the virus and everything is come out that we don't know. This is also make our human being also have to consider that we have the ignorance about the nature, which is we try to conquer, we try to be a master of the nature, which is not true. A lot of areas that we have to be humble, to be learn from the nature. That first thing. And second thing is about the COVID, that is unmasked. That is the market economy very sensitive, very fragile. You see within 1 or 2 months, all the economic system are collapsed in many countries. And that's why a lot of people are jobless and so on and so forth. This also, we have to rethink about our world economic system, how we are going to be, even in the future, another pandemic is happening. We can coping better and longer, and that the people will not in the poverty or jobless and killing themselves or try to run to get the food for the daily or every meals. That kind of system we have to rethink. That's another unmarked from the COVID work. Thirdly, also we learned that the COVID also open unmarks about the world leaders, how they deal with the issues. And, it's many countries, a lot of leaders, women leaders, right? Taiwan, from the even New Zealand or Korea and other, China and so on. Many countries are dealing, they have that kind of cover, the issue is better than many countries, which is also some of the countries just blaming to the others rather than collaborate to work hand in hand. Yeah. And also, this kind of issue also is another issue is about the unmarks, about spiritual well-being of the human society. That also we see that the cases of those who are panicked, those who are depressed, those who are committing suicide are increasing. That because of this pandemic, because of this crisis, and that's combining together as the COVID also helping to unmark the hidden connection of the issues that are interconnected together. And this is, I think, that is as a global, we have to dealing with these issues and seeing as a system change, not structural change, not just only COVID by itself, right? This is also have to think as the whole system. And regarding to Thailand, the number of cases is not that high. It's about only 3,000. But also we are panicked. We are, a lot of issues about the poor people to access to healthcare, to the food and so on, or even the job to get money. Those kind of things are very much concerned. And also, as you know, also Thailand, that in the past over 10 years, we have the political crisis also. That, with the COVID pandemic is only 2 or 3 months, but political crisis is much longer for our country that we still struggle even until today. That also we have to deal with that, yeah? And also the gap, the rich of the poor and those kind of things open up the issues.
What about INEB?
Regarding to INEB, International Network of Engaged Buddhists, as both of us, me and Vidya, we are part of the network. We are a small Buddhist network of the, for those who are trying to do something for the society. What we have done is 3 areas. One is we issue a statement to addressing about the issue that when the COVID is happening, that we are not trying to urge the community and the society to working together to bridging the gap and support to the people, those who are in need regardless of the economic status of the race, caste, religion, gender, citizenship, or place of birth. That's also the statement that we are trying to address the issue, which is within Thailand itself or broader in many countries in Asia or around the world. And some of the issues that we are very much concerned is like India, for example, during the shutdown by the Prime Minister and of India, and that kind of thing. Also, the issue regarding to the Muslim community in India, so that is very much sensitive. That's our concern as a Buddhist. We also concerned to our brother and sister Muslim communities. And secondly, we also make a launch of the mindful action for the emergency relief to support to those who are in need. And so far, we have been working through our network partners in 4 countries: India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Myanmar. That is, so far we reached out to around 20,000 people that we are able to support food, hygienic supply, and so on and so forth, and information distribution to the community to prevent about the COVID itself. That these 20,000 people, that they be able to survive for another 2 weeks, or some of them 1 month, that through our partner support. And we still try to find resources to help to support that as well, which is also some of you, those who are interested to help to support that, also you can do through our INEB network website. That also there's a click to donate there. And then another area that we are looking into more a long-term vision, how we can, as I addressed the issue in the beginning about the structural change, how we can change the system and so on. We are looking into the 4 areas of the vision. One is on the dynamic economics, the right livelihood, and holistic development. As this kind of thing, this area also, as talked to you, Katherine, before, that we have to also focus on the approach of the community-led development, not just only trickle-down system or the market-driven economy, and those kind of things is not sustained. And secondly, also we are looking into more long-term environmental and sustainable interbeing. That how we can is interconnectedness, and that is how we can live with the nature. And thirdly is on the cultural diversity and coexistence. That also is regarding about the different issues of the identities in the society and so on. And fourthly is about the good governance, human rights, and peace. And that also, that 4 areas that we are developing the concept paper as a guiding vision for our network. At the same time, also we would like to working with the others, any organization or individual or the institution, that we can work hand in hand in these visions and take action. Thank you.
I love your analogy of the mask. I think that it is something that we're acutely aware of, is the way in which this crisis has revealed things that were present, has unveiled, unmasked things that were very much present. Could I ask both of you, we're focusing, of course, on the religious responses, and I'm interested in what you're seeing in terms of religious response. Particularly, of course, we're concerned about conflicts and tensions, for example, in Myanmar, but also in other parts of the broader region, a rise in what appear to be tensions that are linked to hate speech that has a religious dimension, targeting specific groups. Is there a revival? Are you seeing creative efforts? Are you seeing people stunned and unable to respond in some of these communities. How would you characterize what is clearly a very large question of how the religious leadership, let's talk more about the religious leadership and institutions than about how people's spiritual lives are evolving?
Okay. Maybe I start, Moo. Okay. Let me try to find the words. I think the word is distraction. Okay, because I don't think anyone has. We have not really addressed issues of conflict deep enough to make resolutions. We may have, in our specific smaller communities, we have gone into conflict zones, conflict areas where we try to do conflict mediation and resolution in the space, but really addressing the root of conflicts from the religious actors' perspective, I don't think so. I think the COVID-19, in my view, we have shifted our attention to something else. First of all, I think we have shifted our attention to trying to help the people that need help immediately. So that in a good in a good perspective is that yes, allow us to bring to unite some people together and say, look, we now have a common problem, right? And let's try to work together to solve. So there are a number of interfaith groups in Malaysia, and I've also read in Thailand and in all over parts of Asia that have come together to support people. Okay. On the other hand, we have seen with the migrant communities in Malaysia, for example, there's great separation. So there's this dichotomy of a reaction that's happening now, right? Because we are all reacting to a situation. That's why I'm a strong believer that while we are trying to address issues today, we must not lift our foot off the pedal, where we still need to continue to focus on the core issues and on the structural issues, because we don't want to make this a distraction. So I personally, I don't see any progress, neither have there been any advancement in the conflict, or we don't read of it within our devices and all that. So I think we need to be more aware, we need to find out more, we need to go in and understand the situation as it is. And this is where networks come in. We talk to each other, we have connect our networks, we try to get information as much as possible, and from the information we get, we devise our action. Yeah.
Moo?
Well, I think some people are just dealing with the only one crisis, but some people is dealing with much more, with a double crisis or triple crisis or multiple crises. Like some people, like for example, the refugee, the IDP, internal displaced person, in people in the conflict area, or even the migrants, workers, and so on and so forth. These is different degrees of the crisis that they are confronting. And some of the, the area, for example, in Myanmar, that our partner, as you know, that in Rakhine State and Chin State, is even now they're still fighting in those areas. And over around 160,000 internal displaced people in those two states. And, it's very sensitive, very difficult to access to the area, but through our partner in Myanmar, also we are trying to help even the small part, whatever we can do, especially in Chin State, we still be able to access in, but in Rakhine, it's very difficult. And that kind of thing we are trying to help to respond for these immediate needs. And today also we are trying to work on this, how to support to the vulnerable, like children. And some of them, even they stay in the IDP camp. They have the, the sexual harassment and so on and so forth. This kind of thing also we are trying to work on that. And we just talked to Arigato International, and they are going to, work with us to support some of the children in difficulty in the IDP camp. That also is, we are working on that at the moment.
Vidya, you started with something that's also very much on our minds, is trying to take stock of what's happening overall to society, and of course how the religious side is playing out. And one of my questions to you, actually I have two, is what kinds of information would you like to have? I worked on East Asia during the East Asia crisis of 97, 99. And one thing we realized then was that the basic reporting systems were not prepared for a crisis. In other words, it was very difficult to know who was really vulnerable, who was suffering, what was happening, how many people were dropping out of school, what was happening in terms of hunger, in terms of malnutrition. What kinds of information would you like to have? And I particularly like, in many parts of the world, the reports are pretty clear that there is a spike in domestic violence affecting women. Moo, you just were mentioning children as well. What would you like to know? What do you know? And what is the response?
For me personally, if I put other hats on, I'm very much into the technology and data space, right? And for me, I would like to have details at the granular level. It's not enough to say there are 3,000 cases of domestic violence today. I like to know which areas, what's the demographics, and then so we understand the problem, right? High-level data alone won't help us understand the problem. If you don't understand the problem, we can't solve it, right? To solve the problem, it has to be right at the community level. And that's what Moo has mentioned. We need to be right at where the examples are, in Rakhine State, in Cox's Bazar, in the detention centers in Malaysia. That's the granular data that we really need if you really want to help the individual, the people. That's what we need. We are not getting that level of information. The high level data we can, right? What would be exciting or interesting for me personally, and something that I would like to see, within the INEB network, to be able to collect such information, whether it's from the public domain or with collaboration with partners, so that we can then aim and target our responses, our aid and support, okay, from our organization, from our partner organization, to support where it really needs the most. Right? But at the same time, we need to also understand that the root cause of things, right? I think this is where the heart of the spiritual tradition comes in. In our tradition, we always look at what is called the wisdom and compassion. If compassion without wisdom, is just one-sided, and the other way around is one-sided. So you have compassion, you're going down there, you have to come with the wisdom. That means the knowledge, the data, the information, so we can formulate much deeper, lasting responses to crises like this, right? But again, it's sitting here from the comfort of our rooms is an easy thing to say, but what I'm saying is that the problems are real there. We really need to go there and get our hands dirty and really understand what's happening. And I think we are not doing enough of that. I'm not discrediting people who are doing a lot of work down there, but I'm saying that more of us could do much more. We should all bring our resources to help everyone in need.
I agree completely, and hope that we maybe can find ways to work together on that. Moo, in addition to answering that question, what are the trends you're seeing and actions on the hate speech issue that has been so much fuel on the fires of interreligious tensions across a number of countries?
Well, I think in terms of to find the information with this digital age, it's not that difficult as 20 years ago. I think a lot of it's easier to access to the information. But the problem is with the attitude. It's about perception of the people, or those who have resources, or those who have power. You know, what kind of perception they see, what kind of attitude they have. This kind of thing is much more important. But at the same time, with the religious, like as you say, it's a freedom, you know, to expression and those kind of things is easily. But a lot of problem with this, with the attitude and perception. I think that is we have to deal with that. And also, you know, some of them acting because they have the ignorance, and also they are trying to be win, as well as also is with that kind of ego that I think that is as you see, you know, some of the people said they can cure this kind of disease and, you know, those kind of things. Some people want to blame the others that, you know, they make the trouble and those kind of things. As Vidya said, is, you know, the perception attitude is a wisdom. And also with the compassion, we have to bring that in to our society much more, and how that can apply into our education system, our churches, our temple, and so on and so forth. It's long-term work. It's not that easy because our society full of this kind of, you know, hate and so on, rather than compassionate.
I want to encourage anyone to put your questions in the Q&A box. But meanwhile, I want to follow up with both Vidya and Moo on both this question of the hate speech. And what you're suggesting is that it's so deeply ingrained that you really have to take a societal attitude rather than, for example, a mechanical attitude of banning certain kinds of expression. And I'm also interested from both of you in what you see happening with education, and particularly the kinds of education that you're talking about, the education centered on values and pluralism and so forth. With all the schools closed, I guess they're all still closed. Maybe Moo, why don't you start, and then maybe go to Vidya.
Well, you know, it's in the larger scale, if we still have Pentagon, if we still have the Ministry of Defense and so on, that kind of thing is not that easy. And also that kind of thing also making a lot of money, business and so on. That kind of thing. And that also driven, you know, when I was young, you know, a lot of young men, they want to become a soldier and, you know, high rank and those kind of things. That kind of thing is come from, you know, not education by itself, even, you know, the structure, you know, that is, if you can train in the West Point and so on, you know, that you will be better than the others. Education the same, you know, if you have high school degree, you feel that you are lower than the bachelor degree, master degree, PhD, and so on and so forth. Even now, post-PhD, postdoc, and those kind of things. I think that kind of education is we have to rethink about it, about the whole education system, and that also about the information, how we can, you know, what kind, some level also we have to screen it, have to block it and so on. But at the same time also how to change that also from the within also, not from the power that be. Otherwise the society just, you know, those who are watching, like always big brother like in China, and and also those who are under. That's kind of society also we don't want.
Yeah.
Vidya,
We need
what
to find the
about
middle way, right? Yeah. Let me jump in there. Let me jump in from what Moo said. Agree and disagree, but I think it's the rethinking. You would like to use the word reimagining education is important, because I would like to stretch one more ministry. You know, if you have Ministry of Education, you have a problem, because why? Education has become so institutionalized, so structured, very industrialized. You might even say to the point of capitalistic. in its core structure, that the enhancing of the head, the knowledge, is so far beyond education of the heart, the soul, the being, the person. That is what religion talks about. That's what the religious space talks about. That's why we believe that the religious response to education, whether in this whole pandemic environment or even before, after this, is to really re-look at the education to be more holistic, right? Again, this is very idealistic to many people, okay? Because most people think of good education, good results means good job, meaning, good future. That's the standard thinking. We need to, with this COVID now, you have a PhD, so what? You don't have a job. You have a job yesterday as an engineer, today you're gone, So it brings this COVID now is an opportunity for us to help us not just to rethink, but also to re-educate ourselves. That this level of holding on to the learning that we have been taught is impermanent, and we need to look at something deeper, more lasting, if you like, okay, and more fulfilling and meaningful, okay. And this is where we touch at values, we touch at ethics. The expression of it will be at governance and so on. So that part needs to be really, really strengthened, right? I know whole education discussion is probably a whole webinar in itself, or maybe several webinars. But I think I just want to touch on this, and this is very close to my heart as well. So we have to, the religious response need to really think through very carefully to answer the issues of education today. Don't just follow blindly. Most temples, churches, or religious education, they follow the same method. You go to a school on a Sunday, there's a textbook, there's a classroom, exactly the same. It's academic. We have to focus more on the heart. And I think this COVID-19 shutting down of schools and shutting down of religious places of worship is a good way to really think about it, because you can't go to temples anymore. You can't focus on the building. You can't focus on the rituals. You can't focus on the donations. You probably have to focus on the values. And this is a great time to push this through. So these are my thoughts of education for now.
Yeah, I want to come back on that. I want to challenge you. But for the moment, we have a couple of very specific questions to you coming in. So Moo, the first question is, what's going on in southern Thailand? And how basically how is the conflict? What do you know of the conflict? But also, what about the peace building efforts there?
I think the situation with the violence is turned down, but the issue is coming up is with those who are affected by this COVID things, and a lot of them also they went to Malaysia, went to the religious event, and also there are of course there are they are helping those who are got affected, and also but some certain level in with some level of the Buddhist community, they're spreading news about those who are Muslim, that bringing this in and so on and so forth. That also some part of it, but not spreading as the whole, but here and there. But situation in terms of the violence is not that much, and the government is support to that, and the community also, the Muslim community also support each other in that area, and even those who are they have a kind of the area that the people can put the food and everything is there, people can pick up easily. That kind of thing is the community is support each other is quite well, and now spreading into the whole Thailand.
The next question is builds on something we were talking about before, which is the interfaith, but it's essentially, what we're hearing is that the religious outreach to vulnerable communities, the specific support, seems to be quite community-led and seems therefore to be somewhat perhaps fragmented. So how far is there sort of local level cooperation between groups, and is there a structure at the national or at the regional level that makes it easier for groups to work together more efficiently, shall we say, or more effectively, reaching more people, identifying those hidden groups that are really the most vulnerable? Moo, do you want to start, and then Vidya?
Well, as you said, the community-led is one part of it. And regarding to the Buddhist community in Thailand, also the Supreme Buddhist Council, also the Supreme Patriarch, also have the letter to order the Buddhist temple also open up and helping the people. Like the temple nearby my office also, every week they're providing food to the community in their community. And regarding, they just show about their ID card, not about their religions, that they belong to this community area, that they can get access to the food and so on. That kind of thing is here and there. And in Thailand is quite, a lot of active monks. Is even our Bhikkhuni, like Vidyananda, also she is very much, working hard, very hard to support the people. And as some of you may know, Thailand, the government give like 3 months, for those who are vulnerable, like about 20 million people or something. But very difficult. Some of them, they have to, register with through the mobile phone, the smartphone and so on. Some old people, they cannot. That also is very difficult and also have to identify that they are poor. That is also really difficult. and a lot of, process. And that's why a lot of complaining, and also is the government also have to responsible for that because of their structure itself, not for everyone, but certain group, and very difficult to access.
Vidya, what are you seeing both in terms of local response and interfaith cooperation?
I think that's a very good question on interfaith. We have to constantly ask ourselves, how are we engaging interfaith for this? But as what Moo has mentioned, as I observe for myself here, is that when it goes down to the community level, it is usually a particular community, a particular ethnic group, or particular ethnic religious community. So it's rightly that it may not be so working with different faiths to address these issues, right? But I've seen people from the different faith goes into different the community of other faith and supporting them, and that's what I've been seeing quite often here now. So at this response mode of emergency response mode, I think we are seeing a lot more openness, less, although there are small groups going around different areas, less drawing of boundaries. Say, oh yeah, I know they're different religion, I won't help them. So that has not surfaced. I've not heard much of that. So I think it's a good point that we are seeing today. Again, if there's an opportunity when over time, we can reflect on this and bring religious actors and communities together to reflect together, and it's an opportunity to address, bring the different faiths together. Yeah.
The next webinar we're going to organize will focus on some of the large religiously linked NGOs, global, and how they're responding. So Catholic Relief Services, Lutheran World Service, World Vision, Islamic Relief Worldwide, etc. Tzu Chi, are you finding that you're working with them? Is there cooperation, or is it too hard to create those mechanisms in the middle of a crisis?
I think my opinion here is that I think there is right now there's openness. There's always ready to receive, and they need a lot of these organizations at the community level needs a lot of help, right? And if you just put out your hand and say I'm willing to help, and that's it, you can get in. So I've not sensed or seen any challenges in that area. So I see it as a very positive development, you know. So this is some of the good things I see coming out from this whole pandemic, that you know in some communities is bringing people closer together. Yeah.
Well, let me turn to the future with both of you. Many of you, both of you have mentioned the need for some radical changes, some of which, of course, you've been advocating for many years, and some of which are unmasked by the crisis. So, first of all, what might be your priority agenda? And secondly, how would you start a process to do it? Because just talking about it on a webinar may not help us to change the world. But what kind of processes do you have in mind, with particular emphasis on your part of the world? So Vidya, you can start and then turn to Moo.
I think I share a lot of what I do and my thinking with the rest of the INEB network. So obviously I'm quite plugged into what they're thinking about. But for me personally, and where I feel the areas that need to be focused would be, number one, economics. I think that's really, in my opinion, the heart of it, right? At the balancing the economics is community. You know, I've also been very involved with what is called the Buddhist Muslim Forum, right? And we have together with Moo and some of our colleagues in our network, we are trying to bridge communities and cultures together at a different level, right? To at the more strategic and the more level we can talk about values. So this too is important, because if you try to fix the economics without bringing the heart, bringing the community together, I don't think it's going to work. So these are the two big, very broad areas I would like to focus in, and those are the two areas that Moo has mentioned in the forward, future plan that we are looking at moving forward. So yeah.
What about process? How would you start if you had your wish? What would happen?
Okay, number one, I've shared this in several other forums. Number one, I think from the religious community and religious leaders standpoint, I think we need to be a bit open-minded and more encompassing in terms of knowledge. Okay, many times religious leaders come from our own religious circles and centers, and we remain there. So the knowledge of religion with economics, religion with, say, politics, that realm don't exist so much. It's separated. I think first thing is in the process is to have this knowledge, okay, and to understand. So once you understand, we know how to bridge. When we can bridge, we can help its transformation, right? We are not saying that, oh, capitalism is totally bad, die and change all over again. I think it's a process that first has to start with our own selves, that we need to understand the problems. We cannot just look at the bad thing and say, bad, we want to change it. No. So this is the first process. To me, the second process is really having like-minded leaders coming together and sharing that ideas and putting small pilots and activities into action. I think within the INEB network, Moo can tell a bit more. Things like just slipped my mind, Han Walapa, what's the group name? Wellbeing, okay, School of Wellbeing, have encouraged a lot of eco-type businesses in Sri Lanka. There's an initiative called the Good Markets and so on. So then we encourage, and if we see organizations doing it, we continue, we support whatever we can. Then the principles become action. Right? And further than that, how to transform the society, I think it's still, we need to have more dialogues and think about the deeper process, because ultimately we need to look at things really at the real structural level. You know, the doing part, the activity part is the relatively easy part. I think the structural change is what we really need to think through. For example, we talk about donations, helping the others. You know, where do we get our funds from? We get our funds from people who are in the T20, right? From the larger corporations, where they get their funds from, and then we come back, we give to the people, and the people who are in the receiving end are the workers who are the first to be fired. You know, and this cycle comes back again. So we have to rethink and really understand this whole process much deeper. Yeah.
Moo?
Do you know that today is the day of the International Day of Localization?
Oh.
Okay.
I think that also is one of the issue that we also have to promote, localization to balancing with the globalization. You know, have to bridging this to make it more balanced. You know, regarding to, you know, as you know, in our part of the world, like in Asia or many other countries, the community still exists. The traditional community still exists.
Yes.
And also we can recreate the intentional community. As we also part of this global eco-village network that they have been working for in the past 20 years, link up with these 50,000 eco-villages around the world. You know, if we can rethink and support this kind of movement, you know, to re-establish and also maintaining the community, that as a mechanism to support each other, that can help even reduce, you know, the role of the government or the business, you know, in the long run, that to deal with this kind of issue, any crisis that come in. And at the same time, you know, the people also have more participation into everything, into even education. You see that the education is very much centralized, you know, by the government, and now into the business, right? But the education also should belong to the community. You see that where is the education access, the school there, the community is collapsed, because education focused on train, build up capacity for individual, not build up the community. That's why a lot of those who are talented, bright, and so on, they move out from the village, from the community to the city. And those kind of things, that's why the village is collapsed. All over the world, the same trend. We also have to rethink, bring back the community and the community spirit, you know, into that, not just only the establishment. This kind of thing also, we have to promote more localization to balance with globalization.
Virginia Ferris has posed some very good questions, and this one I think is to both of you, is to what extent the Thai and the Malaysian governments are really seeking the help and support of religious leaders in mobilizing responses to the crisis and educating the public. So what are the sort of formal and informal channels of the government? And we're 5 minutes from the end, so perhaps you can give us any last thoughts as you answer. Moo, do you want to start? What's happening in Thailand?
Well, I think the government is quite busy with what they want to do, dealing with different issues. Very little with the religious group. You know, in the beginning, what they can do is do organized chanting. That kind of thing, you know. Not much about that. And yesterday, also, you know, last 2 days, busy with the Thai Airways going to be bankrupt and so on and so forth. The government is too busy with so many things. And a lot of community, religious community, they do themselves. Yeah, they are Buddhist, Christian, or Muslim. They support that because the people support them. Now the time that the religious is to support back to the community. That's it.
Vidya.
For Malaysia, I don't see any formal requests coming from the government to say ask religions to help. Of course, if you understand Malaysia, majority Muslim have access to the mosque. Obviously, that network is being used to disseminate information. But I'm not seeing any formal, bringing in the interfaith movements to this to respond to this. Not yet, right? I hope sometime in future when the government really gets its act together, the new government gets its act together. So that's my view. But in terms of closing remarks, there's one paradox. There's one phrase I wanted to share with you when we talk about hate speech, right? And it's something we need to think about. This a lot of the intercommunal conflicts have religion as its theme, involved in that conflict as a theme, not a religious conflict, right? So being in the religious space, are you part of the problem or really part of the solution? How can you rethink to be part of the solution when you're very entrenched in your own way? So we have to really break out and think about it another way, think about it in different ways. I would love to see one day, very soon, interfaith will come together and say, interfaith webinar or seminar on the transformation of education, serious discussions, on the transformation of economics and the localization and helping the communities grow. How can we develop through our own practice, our own teachings, develop opportunities in that space? Yeah. So that would be an interesting process in this whole mechanism. Right? Yeah, I think that's about all I have for right now. Thank you.
But that's it's interesting because in many parts of the world there have been two key areas of dialogue and discussion between governments and religious institutions. The first is in the transmission of what are called messages, the public health messages. And the second is a lot of tension around closing religious sites, churches, mosques, etc., because of the lockdowns. But it sounds as if that has not been a major focus in either Thailand or in Malaysia, that people have basically responded to the government's orders. Well, we've come to 1 minute to the end. And I want to thank both of you for what I think has been a very provocative, thought-provoking and provocative discussion that puts a lot of issues and challenges on the table for all of us. You both are leading thinkers within your networks as well as within your countries. And we're very grateful to you for your time, and also to the people who have listened in and who will listen in to the video. I'm anxious to capture some of the ideas that have been put on the table here that I think are a real, I perceive them as a challenge, more even than an inspiration, because I think all of us are trying very hard to understand both what's happening now, but where this is leading, what are the paths to the future. So thank you all very much indeed, and we will have the next webinar in 2 weeks that, as I said, will focus more on some of the institutional mechanisms and the ways that their programs are shifting and the way they're looking to the future. So thank you all very much.